Hello, everyone, and welcome to Alumni Talks. My name is Zornitsa, and I'm the moderator of this session on behalf of the school selection platform Unimi. In today's webinar, you will learn more about the residential MBA programs at the Samuel Curtis Johnson Graduate School of Management at Cornell University. I would like to thank you all for joining us and to welcome our panelists, Chelsea Hann, Associate Director of Admissions, and two of Cornell Johnson's alumni, Natalie Wossene and Juliette Vandal. We will start with an overview of the different MBA programs at Cornell and their advantages. Then we will continue with a panel discussion in which Natalie and Juliette will share with us more about their academic journey at Cornell Johnson and how it contributed to their career development. Your questions are more than welcome, so if you have any, please write them down in the chat box or the Q&A option anytime during the webinar, and we'll take the time to address them at the end of the session. Now I would like to give the word to Chelsea to present herself and the MBA programs at Cornell.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. Good afternoon, probably for most of you, unless you're like us and you're here in the States, then good morning. Hope your day is off to a great start. I'm Chelsea Hann. I'm Associate Director of Admissions here at Johnson. I've been on the team here at Cornell for 5.5 years. I'm just going to share my screen so you can follow along with some of my slides. Some of the things that I plan to talk to you about today, the various MBA program options that we have at Cornell. However, the purpose of today's conversation is going to focus on the residential programs at Johnson. So our 1-year and our 2-year full-time residential MBA programs, that's the two for which I'm responsible and where the 2 programs that our alums participated in as well. I'll go through sort of program structure and format at a very high level, sort of generally talking about the curriculum for the 1-year and the 2-year full-time programs. I can also touch on our class profile and the makeup of those 2 MBA programs. I'll talk more specifically about some unique aspects to our curriculum, and then go through the admissions process. We'll do some Q&A with the alums, and then answer any questions that you all have towards the end. As I'm getting started this morning, just going through the different programs that we have here at Cornell, I would love to know sort of where you're all calling in from. So if you could pop into the chat, maybe the cities or the countries that you're logging on from today. I always find that to be really exciting with virtual sessions. So go ahead and do that. The different program that we have here at Cornell, there's actually a portfolio of 9 MBA programs. So we have about 9. Again, I'm going to focus on the 2-year and the 1-year full-time residential programs that are located on Cornell's main campus in Ithaca, New York. The top 3 that you see in red and with the asterisk there, they are STEM designated. That's why I decided to sort of bold them and call those out. We also, those are all full-time residential programs. The tech program, however, is not located in Ithaca. That's on Cornell's Cornell Tech campus on Roosevelt Island in Manhattan. We also have a number of executive MBA programs and a joint program with Tsinghua. Looking at the 2-year program at again, a very sort of high level, the program starts in the fall, and we at Johnson actually front load all of our core, or most of the core, to the first semester. So your very first fall, as soon as our students start the program, they're taking the bulk of their core. We also weave in a couple of our leadership development classes in there as well. We do that because in the spring, we at Johnson have something called Immersions. This is probably the most unique identifier and differentiator to our curriculum. These are I'll go in more detail about sort of the actual immersions that we have at Johnson here in a second, but they are opportunities for our students to get hands-on experience in whatever it is that they're looking to do post-MBA. Most of our students at Johnson, at least in the 2-year program, are looking to shift industry, function, geography, sometimes all 3, or maybe 1 or 2 of those. So we think it's really important to give our MBA students some sort of pre-internship training, if you will. The goal of these immersions is really to tee our students up for success in the internship, which leads to, of course, enhanced and increased numbers of full-time offers post internship and full-time offers for after graduation. So we have those immersions in the spring. We also have, again, some leadership development courses that you can take, and then some international study trips. The immersions lead really nicely into that summer internship, again, because they're tied so closely to what our students are recruiting for. And then when they come back from their internship in the second year, things get really fun and interesting for our students. That's when they are diving into electives, they're taking on different leadership opportunities on campus, really getting involved extracurricularly. Students can study abroad if they want to. We also have New York City classes and intensives. I will talk about those a little bit more here in a second as well. Global and international study trips. And then the program at Johnson is actually pretty flexible. Our students can take, I think it's like 13 or 15 credits up to a full semester anywhere at the university that they want to, if they have the elective credits in their sort of curriculum available. So lots of our students will take elective classes in the law school or arts and sciences, engineering, maybe industrial and labor relations, maybe the hospitality school. There's lots of different areas where students will sort of expand and dive into other areas of the university. Let's look at the one-year MBA program at a high level here. This program actually, unlike the two-year program, which again starts in the fall, this program runs May to May. It is 1 year and it does not have an internship. Over the summer, when the program starts, our students are actually taking their core curriculum. They're taking the core curriculum in conjunction with the Cornell Tech one-year MBA students, which runs on the same timeline, but again, is located in New York City. So the Tech MBA students will come to Ithaca. They do their core together over the summer. And then at the end of the core and the start of the fall, the Tech students go back to Manhattan, and the one-year students obviously will stay in Ithaca. In the fall and the spring, they are doing primarily recruiting and job search. They're taking leadership courses. They're taking whatever is remaining from their course class selection, maybe diving into some electives and getting involved extracurricularly. And then in the spring, they can take advantage of those immersions that I had just talked about, the New York City intensives and opportunities. And again, taking advantage of extracurriculars and leadership opportunities on campus. And that program, again, ends in May. What I will specify about the one-year program that's different from the two-year program is, again, it does not have an internship, and it does require some different eligibility. So it requires a professional certification, CFA, CPA, PMP, or an advanced degree, so a master's or a terminal degree, in order to apply. And the reason why is because it's really intense. It is fast-paced. It's a lot of work, and so we want our students to really show that they're set up for success before they dive into this program. And because it doesn't have an internship, our one-year MBA students really aren't looking to transition drastically in terms of industry or function. They typically like what they're doing. They like the work that they're doing. They just want to take maybe a quick year off, go back to school, get that MBA, and then go back in and maybe move into a management position, or they're doing the one-year MBA program with one of our different dual degrees that we have to offer here at Cornell. So that's sort of the way around the eligibility requirements with the certification or the advanced degree, is if you're applying for a dual degree, that's oftentimes done in conjunction with the one-year program. Class profiles and who is it that is in these different programs. You can see the program sizes. Relative to our peer schools, we're quite small, and that's intentional. That's something that we really like in terms of building that sort of strong cohort and relationships with your peers, and sort of one-on-one working with the Career Management Center and your faculty, smaller class sizes. Those are the things that we really like to focus on here at Cornell. So we're a little bit smaller than a lot of our peer schools. You can see academic statistics, and then in terms of diversity, we're 39% women in the two-year program. That's actually up 8% year over year. So some work we still have to do there, but something that we're really pleased with this year. 49% minorities, 25% URM. That's also up quite a bit year over year. I think it's up 7%. And then you can see our international and domestic split and the number of countries represented. In terms of work experience, our average is 5, but I always like to pull out the middle 80% because that's actually where most of our students fall, which is somewhere between 2 or 3 and maybe 7 or 8 years of experience. Average age being about 28 or 29. My biggest tip when you're looking at the class profiles and my biggest takeaway, you can find these on our website, is that if you don't fall in these numbers or in these ranges, or these averages don't meet your personal data points or statistics, please don't count yourself out. These are their averages, and this is not representative of our entire class. So we have students that fall below these averages and ranges as students that are above these averages and ranges. So reach out to a member of the admissions team if you're concerned about your profile or your qualifications, and we can certainly talk with you about your background and your fit for the program. Let's talk a little bit more about those immersions that I mentioned earlier. Again, these are spring first year for the 2-year students, or just the spring for the 1-year students. They are a group of classes that is an intense hands-on experience. There's integrated course and field work. So oftentimes what we do is we pair our students with an organization or a company, and they work with them throughout the semester, oftentimes like a consultant. Students are selecting their immersion based off of their industry or career interest, post-MBA. They are coached by business practitioners, and they're working under actual business conditions. So this is really, really transferable to the internship. Oftentimes when our students get to their internship, they sort of already know what they're going to be asked to do because we taught them how to do it in the immersion. These are the immersions that we have here. We have 6. If none of these 6 fit what you're looking for, you do have the opportunity to customize and build your own. So based on, again, what you're sort of looking to do post-MBA, most of these immersions will tie to whatever that industry is. And if not, you can customize. Also on the right-hand column here, you can see our intensives. These are what I talked about related to spending some time in New York City, specifically fintech and digital marketing. We also have an intensive on SGE, this, which is Sustainable Global Enterprise. This actually used to be one of our immersions. We've recently transformed it into an intensive rather than an immersion. The reason why is to give second-year students in the 2-year program the opportunity to sort of dive more into sustainability, other than just giving them the opportunity to do it in their first year. So we have 3 intensives, 6 immersions, and the opportunity to customize. Let's talk a little bit more about these New York City opportunities. I think it's not always common for business school to be able to really take advantage of a 2-campus model and spend some time in a college town like Ithaca, and also take advantage of being in a major metropolitan area like Manhattan. So the ways that our students can do that are through either those intensives or elective classes. Our students can take weekend electives in their second fall semester for the 2-year program, so last year, or for the 1-year program in obviously the fall. Courses are offered on Friday, Saturdays. There may be like 9 to 4 or 9 to 5. You can take 2 during a single weekend if you can sort of figure out that schedule. Some of the classes, they're really interesting. They're sort of innovative. They're entrepreneurial. There's classes like digital leadership, cryptocurrencies, cloud computing. We also have classes in artificial intelligence. Super interesting stuff. You don't necessarily have to be going into a digital focused field after graduation to take advantage of these classes. But if you have the credits in your program and you have sort of the room in your curriculum, you can certainly take advantage of that. The intensives are 7-week opportunities to spend time in New York City. The SGE intensive that I talked about is on Cornell's main campus in Ithaca. The 2 that are in Manhattan are fintech and digital marketing. So the fintech intensive, I think is really exciting. It's super interesting. It immerses students in the fintech sector. The sort of goal of the fintech intensive, because it's so new, is really just to teach students how to sort of speak the language and have conversations about it. So again, you don't have to be going into fintech post-MBA to do this, but because it's becoming so relevant. If you want to be able to have conversations about it, this is a great intensive to take. So takes place spring of second year. It's 4 courses over those 7 weeks. It exposes students to startup ideas, ventures, and tech applications in financial services. I have some sample coursework down there at the bottom so you can see what those classes actually look like. There's blockchain and cryptocurrencies, business models, the FinTech practicum, and then a group field project. Digital marketing, sort of the format and the structure is very similar. The classes are just a little bit different. So it immerses students at the intersection of brand strategy, creativity, and big data analytics. This is 3 required courses over those same 7 weeks. So I will say these do overlap. If you are interested in both, you cannot take both. You have to choose one or the other. The coursework here, digital marketing platforms, strategy, creation, and measurement, the digital marketing analytics, and the group field project. I wanted to briefly touch on leadership programs. I think the leadership development curriculum at Johnson is a little bit different than what you often see from business schools. And I really like the way that Cornell approaches their leadership development. So I wanted to talk about it a little bit. We focus on what we have at Cornell called the 4 C's, competence, character, compassion, and courage. What I like about Johnson's leadership program is that it's sort of individualized. So oftentimes when you look at business school leadership development curriculums, they're sort of the same. And students go through a cohorted leadership development curriculum, meaning that they are graduating and developing the same way, and they all graduate the same type of leader. Johnson is very good about customizing this to say, what type of leader do you want to be? How do you want to develop? Where are the specific skills that you feel you need to grow? And let's make sure that you're growing and developing in a way that's important and relevant to you. So I really like that. We have something at Johnson called JOE, which stands for Johnson Outdoor Experience. That's the photo that you see on the top right of the screen. This happens as soon as our students get here. So before they even start classes, they do JOE. It's a really nice and fun way, I think, to break the ice and get to know some of your peers. You're on teams going through different sort of outdoor obstacles and like ropes course environment. We also have the leading teams practicum, which is what we weave into our core team experience. We have 3 leadership expeditions, depending on your level of comfort. So one is a backpacking trip to Patagonia. It's about 10 days. We essentially drop our students off in one location and pick them up 10 days later in another. Extreme weather conditions, you likely won't see anyone outside of your group the entire time that you're there. So that one's pretty tough. The sort of moderate level is a kayaking trip in the Adirondacks in upstate New York. And then we have a like 1 or 2 day trip where we train with the US Marine Corps in Quantico. We also have a couple extracurricular opportunities that I wanted to talk about. Johnson Board Fellows, which puts our students on in a non-voting position on the board of directors at some of the local nonprofits in the upstate New York region. Really great for anyone looking to go into sort of social impact with a nonprofit space. Leadership fellows are 2nd-year students that have, this is a sort of nomination position. They coach and mentor core teams in the 1st year as they go through their core team experience. And then the Park Fellowship is a 2-year full tuition fellowship for 24 or 25 domestic students in the 2-year program. This is they have an additional leadership development curriculum that is also happening sort of on top of the rest of this leadership curriculum. That's why I wanted to talk about it on this slide, because there's a community service project and some additional leadership development that happens outside of sort of the basic opportunities that we have at Johnson. Where do our students go? So where do graduates go after graduation? This is the employment report for the class of 2020. 2021 is supposed to come out in the next few weeks. I did get a sneak peek at it and it looks very similar, actually a little bit better than this. But I don't have those stats readily available yet to share with you. So for the purpose of today's chat, we're going to use the class of 2020. What I also really want to highlight on this slide is that the class of 2020 graduated during a pandemic. So tough, you know, these numbers are exactly the same as the class of 2019. So the fact that we were able to place our students the same way in a global pandemic, I think speaks volumes of our career management center and the success of our students. We had 93%, I think that should actually say accepted full-time offers 3 months after graduation, not received offers. You can see their base salary and their sort of bonus. What I think is most important on this slide is 3,100, which is the number of individual coaching meetings that our Career Management Center advisors had with our students last year. If you do the sort of the math with the students in the program and the number of coaching meetings, the average is about 5 or 6 meetings per student. Every student is required at least 1 meeting with a Career Management Center advisor. We want to make sure that you're sort of polished and prepared and ready to go before you get in front of a recruiter. But the number of individual meetings that you can have with an advisor is unlimited, as many as you need. And we have 10 sort of members of our Career Management Center. They're really industry advisors. So these are people that worked in industry, had success in their fields, and then came back to Johnson to help our students place in those different areas. Full-time hiring companies, this is the top 15. If you look at the full list of companies that hired our students, it is much, much longer. There's like, I think 200 companies that hired like 1 student. So the full list is much longer. But what I like about this slide of our top 15 is that it's a nice mix. It's a good mix of banks and financial firms, consulting firms, tech companies, and CPG. Quickly wanted to highlight Ithaca for anyone who maybe hasn't had the opportunity to visit or is struggling to find the opportunity to visit based on sort of the pandemic and limited travel. Ithaca is wonderful. I think when you think about going to business school, it likely means that after graduation, you will potentially end up in a major metropolitan area for the rest of your career. I think the opportunity to take a year or 2 years away from that and sort of be in a college town, focus on your development and your network and building those relationships is really, really important. Ithaca is very safe. Cost of living is pretty reasonable. If you like the outdoors, Ithaca will be your absolute favorite place in the world. There's wonderful sort of waterfalls and hiking and gorges, cycling trails. We're on the Finger Lakes, so if you like anything related to the water or water sports, again, Ithaca is great. Thinking about our community and sort of our culture, I like to use this slide to touch on that a little bit because I think it does a nice job representing our community and our culture at Johnson. We are very collaborative, very supportive. I think that's an important word when you're talking about our culture. A lot of business schools, even internally, can be sort of competitive. And I don't feel that Johnson is that way. Most of our students, if not all of our students, have a organic or inherent desire to give back. They're interested in finding ways to get involved, contribute to the community, and finding ways to make an impact. So extracurriculars and leadership opportunities on campus with clubs and organizations is super, super popular. Other students are oftentimes starting new clubs and organizations or organizing different trips and getting involved voluntarily with some local nonprofits or other organizations, maybe at the greater Cornell level that are outside of the business school. Oh, let's move on to admissions and talk about what's next. So now that you have a good sense for the program, the community, where our students are placed, let's talk about how to apply. So these are our application deadlines for the 1-year and the 2-year program for this year. You can see some of these have already passed. So if you are interested in applying for 2022 entry, your next opportunity to do that will be during our January round on January 5th. That is actually the last deadline that we have for the 1-year program. After January 5th, we accept applications on a rolling basis until March 8th. March 8th is the last date that we will accept applications. For the 2-year program, you can apply on January 5th, or we have a final deadline on April 12th because the 2-year program doesn't start until the fall. Keep in mind that the January round is our heaviest and it's our most of alumnus application round. It aligns with a lot of our peer schools. Round 2, which is sort of the most popular round of application. So sort of the timing that it takes us to get through those applications is a little bit longer than getting through our application volume in round 1 or in April. But if you are an international student and you are considering applying for 2022 entry, you do really want to try and get that application in by January rather than April. Or if you're applying for the one-year program, definitely by January, just thinking about sort of visas and documentation and how long that process can take. I'm not going to go into this in a ton of detail because you can find this on our application requirements page on the website. This is a checklist of our application and what we require for a submitted application at Johnson. What I do want to highlight that's maybe different than some of our peer schools is the letter of recommendations. At Johnson, we only require 1. Our second is optional. We will accept up to 2. Lots of our peer schools require 2 letters of recommendation. We only require 1. The other difference is at Johnson, we are allowing our applicants to submit a request for a GMAT or a GRE test waiver. I want to talk about this a little bit because the test waiver is not for everybody. So the test waiver is for anyone who outside of the GMAT or the GRE has evidence of quantitative and academic success on their application. So if you did not study anything quant heavy or you didn't take a lot of quant classes during your undergrad or grad school, or if you're not working in anything related to sort of heavy data or numbers, managing a budget, working in finance, you should really think about submitting the test score. It's helpful for us to see that additional data point. And then the last thing I will highlight is if your native language is not English, we do require a language exam, a TOEFL or an IELTS. And at Johnson, our interviews are invitation only. It's also a little bit different than some of our peer schools. Some of our peers, you can sort of self-initiate during an open interview period. At Johnson, they are invitation only. I want to take some time here to introduce you to our alumni, and let's hear from them a little bit related to their experience during and after the MBA and at Johnson. So I have the pleasure of being joined today by Natalie, who's at Microsoft. She graduated in 2014, and Juliette, who's at Conagra Brands, and she graduated in 2018. So some different sort of timelines when they participated in the program, but I'm sure you'll hear some overlap related to their experience and what they liked about Johnson. So I will start by asking each of you to sort of quickly introduce yourself and then answer this question during your introduction. What were you doing before you started the MBA, and what are you doing now? Natalie, let's start with you.
Sure. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you're calling in from today. I graduated from Johnson in 2014. My immersion was SGE, Sustainable Global Enterprise. And I am currently Seattle-based at Microsoft. It's my second company since graduating from Johnson. I joined Intel straight out of Johnson and then made the transition about 9 months ago. Prior to my MBA, I was a Teach for America core member. I taught high school math in Philadelphia. And then I worked for the department, the State Department in their education fields doing college access. Technology was always an area of interest. And so I knew I wanted to go towards that in my career. And I actually thought I was going to go to Johnson to jump into consulting to then jump into tech. But I was able to make that transition a lot shorter.
Cool. So my name is Juliette Vandal. I was Johnson class of 2018. Pre-business school, I worked in advertising in New York City at an agency doing media buying for Samsung. So a fun, exciting brand to work for, but kind of a narrow experience. So really wanted to go back to business school to broaden my business skills and also transition into a client side role in brand. So went to Johnson, and then post-business school, I actually did 1 year at IBM consulting for consumer goods companies. And then after a year of traveling a lot, I decided to finally go client side, and I'm now at Conagra Brands as an associate brand manager, and I'm working on innovation for our shelf-stable meals product. So, you know, with the pandemic, people are buying a lot of canned food. So it's been a really interesting time to work in this space. And yeah, thinking of some good innovation for the future.
Perfect. Thank you both. Now, I want to ask sort of a three-part question, but I think they tie together really nicely. Can you tell us what you were looking for from your business school experience and why you chose Johnson? And then once you got there, what did you value most about the program or your experience?
So I heard looking for and what did you value? So I heard two things. Is there a third part? No.
The third part was just why you chose Johnson.
Oh, okay, why? So I was looking for, so I already had another grad degree, and it was in the city. So I'll just share, I went to Penn for a master's in education, and it was big, it was in the city, and it was great education, but I knew I wanted to be somewhere that was a little bit smaller, a little bit more community oriented, and that had a little bit more hands-on learning. Like I knew as a career switcher, it was very important for me to be in a space where I could actually learn something and practice it. And I know there was a really great question in the chat, which hopefully we'll get to, about which companies did you get to work with for hands-on learning. And I felt like Johnson did a very good job of blending like case studies, but also kind of like your quantitative things that you actually have to learn. And so as a career switcher, I didn't want to go somewhere that was all theory or all case studies. I wanted a good balance, and Johnson was offering that. I chose Johnson for a few reasons. One, the community was a big part of it. I was a Forte Fellow, and so, which is a scholarship for women, and so I got the Forte Scholarship, and I just connected with a lot more of the leadership during my visit than I had at other schools, and so that's what really led to that decision. What I value most is going back to that community. I love my Johnson family. Actually, for Christmas, one of my best friends from Johnson is coming with her whole family to stay with us, and so that has been really valuable. I actually had one of my professors in at Microsoft 2 weeks ago provide one of her workshops that I learned at Johnson and then became a TA for, and literally the course was so great that our CVP is now asking us to do it for all 400 people in the org. And so just those relationships that I continue to build upon have been very powerful and continue to be in my career.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of that resonates with me as well. You know, a lot of it. I was also a Forte Fellow, and that was really important to me. But yeah, like I said, you know, during my time in advertising, I just felt like my experience was so niche. I didn't know, you know, how to listen to like an earnings call and understand all the financial aspects of that. So I knew I just wanted to kind of broaden my skill set and go back to school. I had also been living in New York City, so I really wanted, you know, just a community where everyone kind of moves to one place and you really build those relationships because you're in a new place altogether. So I kind of exclusively looked at schools in, you know, not in the biggest cities in the US. Some things that I was looking for, you know, I did feel like it was going to be a big jump to go into brand, into client side, and definitely kind of have that like full ownership of a brand and the decision making and P&L ownership. So, you know, seeing the Immersions at Cornell was just a really big draw. So I did the strategic marketing immersion. So in the second half of my first year, I consulted for a company that was in the consumer food space. They were trying to figure out what their next brand and kind of flavor profile should be in the frozen food space. And so, you know, we had a weekly call with the company and people that worked there, and we got to do real things that I now do today in my job. So that was just such a good experience to do right before the internship. So then when I got to my internship, I felt like I knew how to kind of wrap my head around this huge project and problem, and try to kind of figure out the best way to solve it. So that was a really big draw to the community, to the school. Another thing that I think is really unique about Johnson is that it's incredibly student-led. So the professional clubs, the events, everything is very student-led. And so, you're giving back so much that you really buy into that community, which I think is really great. So, those were a lot of the things I was looking for in an MBA program, and Johnson really delivered on all of those. Also just, the network, like Natalie said, friendships today that she got in business school, those are so strong. The network is really strong. I moved to Chicago post business school, and like I said, I spent 1 year at IBM. And when I decided I wanted to shift client side, I reached out to the alumni here, and that's how I got my next job. So, that network is just so strong. We all stay in touch as the, Cornell alums in Chicago. We have 3 at my company today, and we, have lunch all the time, and it's really great to have that community. So, yeah, my experience at Johnson was really amazing, and I still reap those rewards today.
And I'll just, Chelsea, before you move to the next question, I'll just echo on the network perk and the location and how that's so intertwined and critical. Like I mentioned that I went to and got another master's at a big city. And the thing with, cities are great, but then there's so many distractions and so many competing priorities. You want to go out to the latest restaurant, and you want to go see a play, and then you've got your friends from other parts of your life, probably who live in that city. But in Ithaca, everyone is there for that, like that sole purpose of being educated. And a lot of the other people you interact with are like folks who are in the labor relations school or in other grad programs. And so it's very academic sort of networking, which is different, but also because it was Ithaca, like you ran into your professors and your friends at the grocery store or at the restaurant, what have you. And it created a more intimate environment, whereas campus and your experience wasn't just in Sage Hall or what have you, or what buildings now exist since I left, but they were constantly in the coffee shops in the other places around Ithaca. And I really appreciated that. And it led to closer relationships, I think, and more networking.
Perfect. Thank you both. Now I'm interested sort of in hearing more about this, because you both are in your second role post MBA. You both are at a different company than the one that you initially recruited for after graduation. And I think that's important, because I think a lot of business school students are very focused on that first job and landing that initial role after you graduate. But realistically, that's not where you stay for the rest of your career. So I would love to hear if you both could talk about how you felt you were prepared for that initial job after your graduation, and how Johnson prepared you for that. But then more importantly, if you still feel like Johnson has prepared you in your second or maybe your third, for the rest of your career. If you could talk about that, I think that would be really great for the panel or the attendees to hear today.
Yeah, most definitely. Juliette, you want to go ahead or?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, so, I had always kind of been between, my background pre-business school was in the client services world. And so I had always I did like that, but when I went to business school, I did want to get into client side. But this really cool opportunity came up at IBM where they were building up a new practice. I would be able to consult for different consumer goods companies and kind of get I had never worked with or for a consumer goods company. So I was trying to kind of figure out if that was what I wanted to do and what kind of company to go to. So, I felt like if I do take this first role, what I had learned from school was that I could, network and build with the community to try to get to another role if that's what I wanted to do. But also that, I felt prepared for this consulting role and trying to work with all sorts of different companies and kind of tackle projects every time I went to a different project. So, or tackle problems every time I went to a different project. So I felt like the program really set me up for success in the consulting world. And then once I decided, actually this travel is a little much for me. It was moving to a new city and then having to travel all the time. It was just a lot. So after the first year, when I started to think about where I could go and what was next, I knew that I could rely on the community. I did not apply to a job that wasn't through an alumni. I talked to a ton of different people about what companies they were at, what I knew a lot more about what I kind of wanted at that point. And so just being able to talk to people honestly and get their perspectives on their company was really valuable. And you know, I felt confident with the experience that I had in business school that I could really do anything. Because I think you gain such a good just well-rounded knowledge of things in general, from like taking a finance class, a stats class, a marketing class, an economics class. So, you know, like today we're dealing with like unprecedented inflation in our manufacturing of canned food. You know, there's inflation on steel, there's inflation on beef. So it's been really interesting to think back to my economics class and at least have a little knowledge of everything that I deal with on a day-to-day. So yeah, you put a lot of stake in that like first company that you go to post business school, but I really felt like after that year that I wasn't scared to make a transition, make a pivot, and I really felt the support of the alumni in my city.
Yeah, similar. I joined Intel through a rotation program, a very competitive rotation program where they took about 14 to 15 MBAs from the top schools. And Johnson was a big feeder into this program. And I got the role because, I got wind of the program because of a professor who's like, you should look at this role, and then connected me with alums who'd been through the program. And, you know, what I loved about Johnson is you could specialize if you wanted. I went there for the SGE immersion, but at the same time, I did take a balance of like tech courses. I did take a balance of like leaders and organization courses and some quant courses that kind of, I felt, provided a very good generalist MBA type of experience for me. And so it allowed me to transition to a rotational program super easily and be open to different functions. So I went through a rotational program and I tried different things. In my first role, I was a venture lead. I had my own product and I got to bring it to market and I got to do a pilot. And then I jumped into sales and I was like, I have no idea what's going on, but I was able to use, you know, some of the things in my critical thinking course and tech courses to really have a point of view and bring impact to the business. And that just led to the other thing. And ever since then, it's been a lot of just my network, but also just, you know, impact that I'm making on the job. I heard someone say yesterday, no one gets promoted because they were busy. In the same way, no one gets a job because they just did busy work. It's like, how did you show an impact? And that's how I then transitioned into Microsoft, was through that first role and opportunity at Intel. Microsoft was my customer in sales. And after working with them for so many years, I found the right role that fit my career goals and was able to make the transition. And even as I made that transition, Johnson folks were the first I called, especially those in HR. And I was like, how do I negotiate? How do I do this? And so it's been kind of really great to have that. And also, since I've gotten here, just continue to build and reach out to folks and say, I'm here, and connect with them. And actually, there's a new VP who just joined Microsoft and she's a Johnson alum. And we're having a coffee chat tomorrow because she's reaching out to me about, you know, as a director, about like, hey, what do I need to know about this company? And so it's really great that, you know, I think across the network, folks are willing to lend a hand, but also seek help. And I do think some of my generalist experience at Cornell has allowed me to easily transition. I have had very different roles. I've gone from product, I've gone into sales, I've done marketing. And so so I do think some of that is the hands-on learning that I said I got. I did a little bit of finance here. I did some projects that were end to end, and that gave me an opportunity to really understand a full business and not just parts of the business, but also be able to go deep in some areas if I need to.
That's great. I'm going to ask you all one more question, and then we will dive into some of the questions that we have in the Q&A. I saw some great ones here that I'm excited to hear from both of you on. But so if anyone does have questions for Natalie and Juliette, please feel free to pop those into the Q&A so that we can transition over to those. Before we do that, I wanted to ask each of you to provide any tips, pieces of advice when you think back to being at this point in your business school search and application journey. You were just started to think about, is business school for me? What experience do I want? How do I research and find the right programs? How do I put together a competitive or strong application? What is your biggest sort of tip or piece of advice that you would have for the attendees online today?
Oh gosh. I'm sure Natalie feels like even more forever ago to you, but feels like forever ago to me. I mean, I think like, you know, I got really hung up on my GMAT or my lack of like financial or, you know, mathematical background. But I do think it's really about your whole profile, you know, like what are you currently doing? What did you do in undergrad? What extra things, you know, do you do that you're passionate about that you kind of give back to your community? Also like do your research, you know, like I think the admissions team can tell when you're just using the same essay for each school. And, you know, you're hearing from me and Natalie about how the community was so important to us, how being in Ithaca was so important to us, like because of that community feel that everyone was coming to one place to kind of go to school, and that brought us together. Use those things in your essay, you know, think about what you really want and how the schools actually offer that up and show that you've kind of done your homework, because, you know, the schools want you to want them, and they also want people that are a good fit that know what, that want to be in that environment. So yeah, I think, you know, just do your research and show that you've done it. That's probably my biggest tip.
Yeah, and I would say if you can, if you know, I know it's pandemic and folks are calling in from all over, visit. I think there's a gut feeling when you visit different schools, get to talk to people and just try to kind of walk in their shoes and experience it. That was big for me. I visited a lot of schools, and there was just some places that were very high on my list. And I'm like, I don't know if I would actually like going here. And so if you have that opportunity, please do that. And if not, like continue to talk to people in your network who have experience with the community or have, you know, been to Johnson or visited or whatever.
Good tips. Good tips. Okay, let's transition over to some questions from the attendees today. I think there's one I do want to highlight here. Juliette, you started to talk about this a little bit, but maybe if you can go into more detail, and Natalie would love to hear your experience with Sustainable Global Enterprise. If you could talk more specifically about your immersion experience, what company did you work with? What was the project that you worked with? And maybe if you're not comfortable speaking to your specific experience, if there's others that your classmates took that you want to talk about or highlight, that would be great too.
Yeah, I can kind of touch more on that. So for the strategic marketing immersion, there was a component that was a class. So we would, you know, do case studies and kind of get introduced to similar business issues and how those were solved, and kind of by reviewing those cases. And in that class as well, the other teams would present their projects. So you got a taste of, you know, from week one, like what was the challenge that they were facing, and then you saw throughout the semester how they tackled it. So that was also great to just have that exposure to other projects. But then the second part of the class was the actual consulting project. So you know, you were on a team of 4 to 5 people, and you would meet weekly or however you kind of coordinated with your client. And you would have deliverables. So we would have kind of I think we had 3 big presentations that we both did to our classes, but also to our clients. And yeah, you know, like I said, at the beginning of the semester, we were given, this is the challenge that we're trying to tackle, and this is what we want at the end. So we kind of started by figuring out how we were going to tackle the project. You know, would we do a month of research and then kind of see what that research said, and then propose a few concepts? So kind of just laying out how we would try to tackle the problem and making sure we had alignment from our client. And then, you know, just going through the semester, we sometimes had to pivot. Sometimes the research didn't exactly come out how we wanted, and that was a great opportunity to kind of see what might happen in the real world and use our professors and the other teams to kind of problem solve how we could, you know, pivot and best tackle the project we were working on. So, you know, at the end of the semester, we presented our final recommendation to the clients, to our professors. And like I said, it was just such a good experience to see like the evolution of all the projects and how, like, what the final recommendations were, and how the teams got there. Because when I then went into my internship, and, you know, day one, you're given what feels like a massive project that you have to do in 10 weeks, you can kind of wrap your head around like, oh, this, like, I loved that this team took this approach, so maybe that's something I can do in the first week and try to get intel through that. So yeah, it was a really cool experience. It was the majority of my second semester was dedicated to the immersion, to the coursework, and then also to the consulting project.
Yeah, and for SGE, I was a TA, but I also was through the program, so I actually got to see quite a bit of customer case studies. And when I was a student, I believe, yeah, it was a big hotel conglomerate. I think ours was Hilton, and we were comparing it to Marriott and Sheraton and stuff. But we were specifically looking at if voluntourism was a thing and a viable business model, and if Hilton should actually have individuals, tourists, pay to volunteer at different locations. And so it was really interesting. Like, we got to look at, like, awesome, like, Tahiti and Mexico and all these places, and look at what are the ecotourism opportunities and whether or not that was a viable business model, and if that's something that customers would also like pay for. So we had to do some customer research, some studies, and also do some modeling about whether it was worth it, and came back with a few recommendations to our customer. Got to work with the customer hand in hand with their sustainability organization, but also with the kind of like their business development organization, and pull together some research, also look at what was happening in the industry, and pull together a project. I mean, I'm still very close to my project team because we spent many hours together late at night pulling this together. And then when I was a TA, I remember like Novo Nordisk was one of our customers, Barclays Bank was one of our customers. And, I know for marketing, Johnson & Johnson, being that Johnson is the namesake, always has a few case studies or projects that they provide the college. And so I would say a lot of Fortune 500s do offer opportunities for hands-on learning for students. And I believe, Sarah, you asked this question, so I just wanted to make sure we gave you specific examples, but also some names of companies.
Yeah, Natalie, that's a great point. The company that I was working for was actually an alumni-owned smaller business, but they produced the product for a lot of big names. So Wegmans is our big grocery store. They would actually produce a lot of the frozen like rice and grains for Wegmans. So not a company you guys would have heard of, but actually a really big company in the food space. But some of the other projects when I was there were from Colgate, from Procter & Gamble. So you're really getting hands-on experience of people that you would do in the real world.
Perfect. Thank you both. That was great. There's some questions in here that are posed towards alums, posed to more of an admissions lens. So I will turn it over to Zornitza, and you can sort of manage Q&A from here.
Thanks very much, Chelsea. Well, there were actually two questions about the GMAT and GRE exams posted by Maya. So I believe you said that you accept both of them, but what is the score required for the GMAT, and what are the requirements for obtaining a waiver for GMAT or GRE?
Yeah, so if you are planning to take the exam, we will accept the GMAT or the GRE. Either one is fine. My recommendation and piece of advice is to do a practice exam on both, because you really don't know which one's going to sort of feel better and be a better fit until you try each one. So do a practice exam for both. Whatever score you get on the practice exams, subtract about 50 or 100 points, because realistically that's more accurate and better telling of how you'll do on test day. And we don't have a minimum requirement for either exam. Our median GMAT score is a 710, average is like a 704. And we don't actually post our averages for the GRE, because when we get them internally, we translate them and transfer them to a GMAT, just so they're evaluated equally. The sort of range to shoot for, though, on the GRE is the mid 160s on both the verbal and the quant section.
Okay, thanks.
There was a question about a waiver, correct?
Yeah.
Okay, so what we're allowing candidates to do is submit a request for a waiver with your submitted application. And then we ask you to provide an explanation on how you see yourself succeeding in and sort of your ability to handle the rigor and pace of the MBA program. And then after you submit your application, those requests for waivers are reviewed by a member of our team, and then we'll be in touch with you on whether or not that's approved.
Okay, great, Chelsea. You know that a lot of people are still worrying about the pandemic situation and wondering whether now is the time to do an MBA. So we have two questions referring to that. The first one is whether you already have fully face-to-face classes, or you have some online classes as well, so you have a hybrid form. And the second one is about the accommodations in this case. How do you manage that?
So I'll speak to Cornell and Ithaca actually during the pandemic. We've been in a pretty fortunate situation with our location. Because we're not in a major metropolitan area, we've had a very different situation during the pandemic than maybe those who are in Manhattan or Chicago or Los Angeles or in a major metropolitan city. So based on our location, I mean, we've been pretty mild here. What I will say though is that they've done an absolutely fantastic job managing the entire pandemic. They actually converted one of their vet school labs that was not being used to a testing center. They are about to, or have just passed their, like, I don't remember the number, but it was outrageous. It was like their millionth test or something. It was wild. So we do all of our testing here on Cornell's campus. They do great sort of surveillance tracing. We've converted the Statler Hotel, which is a 4-star hotel on campus. Part of it is dedicated to quarantining for anyone who does test positive. So you're put in this beautiful hotel with delivered your meals and your laundry and your books and everything that you need. They're sort of on it really, really quickly. But again, our cases have been pretty mild, I think partly because of our location and how Cornell has chosen to manage everything. In terms of classes, we are fully back in person at the moment. We were hybrid last year. We are fully in person now, but we do stream all of our classes live. So if for some reason you are forced to quarantine or you're not feeling well, you do have the option to stay home and log in virtually, just to make sure that everyone is safe and has a different option if they're not feeling safe to go on campus.
Thank you very much, Chelsea, for elaborating on that. Well, usually we get this question in our webinars. So what kind of funding or financial support is available for graduate students? Is it for accommodation or for studying? And is it possible to transfer an application to a different degree program if I change my mind later on? So yeah, two questions, one about the financial things and the second one about the transition to a different program.
Yeah, I'll start with the second question. And the answer is no. You have to choose one program to apply to at Cornell. And then after you submit your application, you can't transfer it to a different program. The second question about funding, we have merit-based scholarships at Johnson. So all of our funding is based on the competitiveness related to the rest of the applicant pool. I will speak separately about international students because we do have a really great situation. We pair with Quorum and they have a program where international students are able to borrow up to the full cost of tuition without a cosigner. So it's sort of a really great situation if you are an international student and you're considering business school here in the US and specifically at Johnson. In order to be evaluated for merit-based funds, you have to answer the question in the application for admission that asks if you would like to be evaluated for merit-based scholarships. As long as you say yes to that question, all of our applicants are evaluated for merit-based scholarships the same time they are evaluated for admission. And you heard Julia and Natalie both mention that they were Forte Fellows. So Forte is an organization that supports women in business, and we are a Forte school. So all of our women who receive merit-based scholarships in the 1-year program and the 2-year program, including international women, are named Forte Fellows.
All right, probably one last question. What are the differences in requirements for international students and US students? And are there differences in the fees? What are the extra costs to apply as an international student?
No additional fees. There's really no No difference. Every student, whether they're domestic or international, is expected to pay the same in terms of living and fees, tuition, all of it.
Yeah, and probably the difference is the language certificate that you already mentioned.
Oh, yes, yes, yes. I thought they were only,
Yeah.
I thought we were only talking about financing and costs. Yeah, the only difference would be the TOEFL or the IELTS language proficiency exam as part of the application for admission.
Yeah, all right. Actually, I see a question here about the immersion. I believe you mentioned already, you already covered parts of it, but I'll read it once again, just in case I haven't missed something. So how does immersion work throughout the program, and how do immersion classes help you prepare for fields you're completely unfamiliar with?
Yeah, so I'll actually ask Natalie and Juliette to address that. We already talked about sort of the immersions and the projects that they worked on and the companies that they paired with. I guess I'll ask, I'll phrase it in a way that might be a little bit different, but can you talk about sort of, okay, Natalie, feel free to head out. Thank you so much for joining us today. Juliette, if you could quickly touch on this, maybe your timeline and how you selected your immersion and sort of what that process looked like.
Yeah, so when you get to school in the fall, there's a lot of information. So when you are kind of considering what you want to do, there's a ton of different sessions, both professional clubs for industry, but then also, what are the different immersions and what will those experiences be like? So knowing that I wanted to go into brand, or consulting, a lot of, what's important in brand is operations. So I was kind of between our strategic marketing immersion and our operations immersion. Honestly, thinking to what I do today, probably either would have really prepared me. I go to plants periodically, and I need to really understand how our plants are set up so that when I'm thinking about new innovation, I can kind of get a sense of if we can actually do it. So anyways, the sessions were great to kind of understand what the curriculum would be like, what were past projects like, second years who had taken the courses would be in those sessions. And then also, like I said, it's such a community-based school that you can always set up time with second years to just like learn more, to pick their brains and things like that. So there's a lot of information up front to kind of decide what you wanted to do. And then even with the project selection, at least for the strategic marketing immersion, we were able to read a summary of all the projects and kind of rank our top 3. And I think you were guaranteed to get one of your top 3. So, I already knew that I was interested in food. And so that was kind of a good fit for me. And I was able to get that project. So yeah, I think that answers the question. But yeah, you'll get a lot of introduction into each of the immersions before you decide. You can set up time with professors, you can set up time with second years, and kind of get a sense of what you want to do. And the point is that you won't necessarily have experience in that field, in that world. You're going to learn it through that semester, and you're going to get that experience through the semester.
Thanks a lot, Juliette. I think we managed to reply all the questions, and actually